Om Agnanatimirandasya Gnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Advaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Pada Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamsha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Sapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंदा। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्णा हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna. Today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, chapter 1, and then today's verse is 22. Rajavacha yata sandharyate brahman dharana yatra sammata yadrishi va haret ashu purushasya manomalam. Rajavacha, the fortunate king said, Yatha, as it is, Sandhyarte, the conception is made, Brahman, Brahmana, Dharana, conception, Yatra, where and how, Sammata, in a summary, Yadrishi, the way by which, Va, or Haret, extricated, Ashu, without delay, Purushasya, of a person, Mana, of the mind, Malam, dirty things. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Narayanam Namaskritya, Naranchaiva Narottamam, Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tadoje Mudire, Nashtaprayesha Budreshu, Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, Bhagavati Uttama Shloke, Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtuki. Translation. The fortunate king Parikshit, inquiring further, said, "O Brahmana, please describe in full detail how and where the mind has to be applied and how the conception can be fixed so that the dirty things in a person's mind can be removed." Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. The dirty things in the heart of a conditioned soul are the root cause of all troubles for him. A conditioned soul is surrounded by the manifold miseries of material existence, but on account of his gross ignorance, he is unable to remove the troubles due to dirty things in the heart, accumulated during the long prison life in the material world. He is actually meant to serve the will of the Supreme Lord, but on account of the dirty things in the heart, he likes to serve his concocted desires. These desires, instead of giving him any peace of mind, create new problems and thus bind him to the cycle of repeated birth and death. These dirty things of fruitive work and empiric philosophy can be removed only by association with the Supreme Lord. The Lord, being omnipotent, can offer his association by his inconceivable potencies. Thus, persons who are unable to pin their faith on the personal feature of the Absolute are given a chance to associate with his Virat Rupa, or the cosmic impersonal feature of the Lord. The cosmic impersonal feature of the Lord is a feature of his unlimited potencies. Since the potent and the potencies are identical, even the conception of his impersonal cosmic feature helps the conditioned soul to associate with the Lord indirectly and thus gradually rise to the stage of personal contact. Maharaja Parikshit was already directly connected with the personal feature of the Lord, Sri Krishna, and as such, he had no need to inquire from Shukadeva Goswami about where and how to apply the mind in the impersonal Virata Rupa of the Lord. But he inquired after a detailed description of the matter for the benefit of the others who are unable to conceive of the transcendental personal feature of the Lord as the form of eternity, knowledge, and bliss. The non-devotees, the non-devotee class of men cannot think of the personal feature of the Lord because of their poor fund of knowledge. The personal form of the Lord, like Rama or Krishna, is completely revolting to them. They have a poor estimation of the potency of the Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita 9.11, it is explained by the Lord himself that people with poor fund of knowledge deride the Supreme Personality of God. Taking him to be a common man, such men are ignorant of the inconceivable potency of the Lord. By the inconceivable potency of the Lord, he can move in human society or any other society of living beings and yet remain the same omnipotent Lord without deviating in the slightest form of his transcendental position. So, for the benefit of men who are unable to accept the Lord in his personal eternal form, Maharaja Parikshit inquired from Shukadeva Goswami how to fix the mind on him in the beginning, and the Goswami replied in detail as follows. Hare Krishna. Actually, when Prabhuji told me that is unable to take the class today because of his the change in timings in London, and also he was preparing to go to America tomorrow. So I was just trying to search the lectures from various devotees, and then I got this beautiful lecture from Bhanu Maharaj, who is Japanese by birth, and then he's stationed in South India. And then I've heard his lectures a lot, and then he's used very inspirational talks. So I thought I would share his lecture on the screen so that at least we can hear him and then get realizations from him directly. So I'll start sharing the screen. Please let me know if you're not able to hear or anything.
Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 22. Rajovacha Yata Sandaryate Brahman Dharanayatra Sammata Yadrasiva Hared Asu Purushasya Manomalam. Raja Uvacha, the fortunate king said, Yata, as it is, Sandaryate, the conception is made. Brahman, O Brahmana, Dharana, conception, Yatra, where and how, Sammata, in a summary, Yadrasi, the way by which, Va, or Haret, extricated, Asu, without delay, Purushasya, of a person, Mana, of the mind, Malam, dirty things. Translation: the fortunate King Parikshit, inquiring further, said, O Brahmana, please describe in full detail how and where the mind has to be applied and how the conception can be fixed so that the dirty things in a person's mind can be removed. Purport: the dirty things in the heart of a conditioned soul are the root cause of all troubles for him. A conditioned soul is surrounded by the manifold miseries of material existence, but on account of his gross ignorance, he is unable to remove the troubles due to dirty things in the heart accumulated during the long prison life in the material world. He is actually meant to serve the will of the Supreme Lord, but on account of the dirty things in the heart, he likes to serve his concocted desires. These desires, instead of giving him any peace of mind, create new problems and thus bind him to the cycle of repeated birth and death. These dirty things of fruit of work and empiric philosophy can be removed only by association with the Supreme Lord. The Lord, being omnipotent, can offer his association by his inconceivable potencies. Thus, persons who are unable to pin their faith on the personal feature of the Absolute are given a chance to associate with his Virat Rupa, or the cosmic impersonal feature of the Lord. The cosmic impersonal feature of the Lord is a feature of his unlimited potencies. Since the potent and potencies are identical, even the conception of his impersonal cosmic feature helps the conditioned soul to associate with the Lord indirectly, and thus gradually rise to the stage of personal contact. Maharaj Parikshit was already directly connected with the personal feature of the Lord Sri Krishna, and as such he had no need to inquire from Sukadev Goswami about where and how to apply the mind in the impersonal Virat Rupa of the Lord, but he inquired after a detailed description of the matter for the benefit of others who were unable to conceive of the transcendental personal feature of the Lord as the form of eternity, knowledge, and bliss. The non-devotee class of men cannot think of the personal feature of the Lord. Because of their poor fund of knowledge, the personal form of the Lord, like Rama or Krishna, is completely revolting to them. They have a poor estimation of the potency of the Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is explained by the Lord himself that people with a poor fund of knowledge deride the Supreme Personality of the Lord, taking him to be a common man. Such men are ignorant of the inconceivable potency of the Lord. By the inconceivable potency of the Lord, he can move in human society or any other society of living beings, and yet remain the same omnipotent Lord without deviating in the slightest from his transcendental position. So, for the benefit of men who are unable to accept the Lord in his personal eternal form, Maharaj Parikshit inquired from Sukadev Goswami how to fix the mind on him in the beginning, and the Goswami replied in detail as follows. Translation: the fortunate King Parikshit, inquiring further, said, O Brahmana, please describe in full detail how and where the mind has to be applied and how the conception can be fixed so that the dirty things in a person's mind can be removed. So the discussion is about what to do at the point of death, and in connection with that, Sukadev Goswami has explained that we have to begin to control the mind, withdraw it from material objects, and concentrate on the Supreme Lord. And he also involves the yoga process with asanas and pranayama, etc. And in relation to that, he's also indicated that you can concentrate the mind in a preliminary way. And that preliminary way is to concentrate on a form of the Lord which is material, which we call the Virat Rupa, or the universal form. And this will lead eventually to understanding the spiritual personal form of the Lord. So that's the basic intention behind these next verses. So in other words, it's the next verses are not the ultimate conclusion, but one step towards accepting the final conclusion. In this particular verse, at the end we see that Parikshit is talking about how to get rid of the contamination in the mind. And then we do that by concentrating on that Supreme Lord. We can ask, why do we have to get rid of the problems in the mind, or why is it a contamination at all? And some people will say, what's wrong with my mind? I'm doing fine in the material world. So from the, let's say, the gross level of existence, we never think of any problem with our mind. Basically, we are concerned with our body. And like animals, they're not much concerned about mind. They're concerned about preservation of their material body. So we have this struggle for existence and whatever going on. And basically all of their activities and emotions or whatever are guided by this idea of we have to survive. So they're very involved with identifying the body itself. When we come to the human being, it's also, we can say at a basic level, this is also what people do, and they struggle to survive. And for some people, it takes a lot of effort just to do that. So they never think about, okay, mind is here, and we've got to control the mind. They never think on that level. It's just let us survive. Yet, a certain number of people, and probably even the people on the lower level, at one point in time, they do start asking a few questions. But as, let's say, we get a little more comfortable in life and we don't have to struggle so much, and then we begin to think a little bit more. We use our mind more. But there's a big danger here. The more we use our mind, and the more we use the mind without any control, the more wild we become. Just for instance, we have traditional societies. Okay? We can say they're very conservative. You go back 50 years or 100 years, and what were the people doing? And they were living their life, whatever. But basically, if we look at what they do now and how people conduct their life, it was very conservative. There were little family units there, and there were children, and there were husband and wife, and they were working very hard. That was it. And of course, then they go to church or whatever, like this. So, a very conservative type life. And we'll see that reflected in all civilizations at a certain stage. They have this very conservative type of life. But then we compare that with the modern world, and we see it's quite opposite. There's no little house with a little family in it at all. It's just people running around the world, uncontrolled. No families. And the children run out of the house as soon as they grow up to be 16 or 17 years old. They run away from the house. And of course, as far as being conservative, no, it's quite the opposite. Everybody's doing everything possible in this world in terms of enjoyment and whatever like that. So we get a proliferation of drugs and alcohol and gambling and all sorts of prostitution, whatever, everything going on in this world, and more or less it's accepted as the standard of life. If you don't do these things, there's something wrong with you. Whereas 100 years ago, these are the lowest class people. We don't want those in our society. Now it's like encouraged, and of course even governments encourage it. So it's a very, very different society we have now. But this was recognized very early as a great danger, and therefore we'll find that the Vedas put a lot of rules on people and say, if you want to be civilized, you have to follow rules. And then they start saying, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do that, and you can't do that. Start limiting people in many ways. So, of course, in the modern world, we say that we criticize that and say, oh, this is, this is too authoritarian, and we want to express ourselves nicely, so you shouldn't control us as much. Put rules on us like this. But we see that, as I say, all around the world it was very traditional like this. There were a lot of rules for everybody to follow. And the reason is that there has to be a certain standard of rules, and these are the rules for the mind ultimately. And if you don't have those rules and the mind goes out of control, then the human being destroys himself. This is what happens. Uncontrolled mind leads to wild behavior, which leads to destruction of a society if everybody's on that level. So therefore there has to be these rules. So all the countries in the world have these rules also. You can't lie, you can't cheat, you can't kill, you can't, all these rules are there for people. Because they realize that if we have uncontrolled, if we just don't have any rules, the mind goes wild. And we do anything. So all those rules are there because the sages realize the danger of the uncontrolled mind in the human being. It doesn't exist in the animals. And they don't have governments to make rules for them. But they do follow rules on their own, and because they're just stuck in their material bodies, and the mind is not developed. But when you start developing the mind, then we get all sorts of desires. So this is the human being's predicament, that he has got this real dangerous mind that can go out of control all the time. So there is a problem with the mind. At the same time, the sages realize that if you control the mind nicely and use it in a certain way, then we can get the most fantastic results for the individual, for the society, for the world. So that depends on how you use the mind, how you control the mind. So in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says the mind is your friend and the mind is your enemy. So the mind is your friend if you control it nicely and give it certain approved goals. Then you get very good results. So the mind acts as your friend and assists you in attaining higher goals in life. And if you don't control the mind and let the mind do whatever it wants, you degrade yourself and you destroy yourself. You get to a lower position, eventually you lose the human body and you become an animal or a plant or whatever. So the message is we do have to control the mind. And we should be, the human being should be aware of higher goals, not the goal of just surviving and taking care of the body, or the goal of getting as much enjoyment out of the body as possible. No, some other goal must be there also. And that's where we get progress in human civilization, where we do have these higher goals. So the mind has to be controlled to do that. So, unfortunately, people in general, though they do have some nice intentions and ideas, etc., we tend to speculate a lot, and we all have our own little ideas. So we can't come to a unified conclusion. What is the actual goal in life even? We can't even come to that conclusion, and what to speak of trying to control the mind to get there, but we can't even get enough intelligence to understand what the real goal of our existence is. So that's why we have to go to the scriptures, and they'll tell us what it is. But we don't have to speculate and everyone have their own little idea about it. So that's a basic principle that is accepted if we follow the Vedic tradition. And what is the principle? You have to follow the conclusion of the Vedas. What they say, we accept that as the truth. Accepting that as the truth, we follow it, and we try to get that particular goal. So in other words, we have an authority for our actions in life and our goals, etc. So we accept the scripture as an authority. The modern world is quite opposite. I don't know what they call it. The sociologists have some term for it, I suppose, but it's nobody wants any authority. That's the idea in the modern world. Everybody's independent, and they're very suspicious of authorities and religions telling them what to do and whatever like that. They may say we're spiritualists, or we like spiritual things, but we don't want any authority telling us what to do. This, of course, is due to the frustration of, authorities imposing rules irrationally or with self-interest, with no proper understanding what the whole goal of the rules are. So because of that, people rebel. And they should rebel also against that. However, if the rules are reasonable, and the goals which are set are also reasonable if we have a little bit of intelligence, if we have some reasonable goals and reasonable methods, then why not follow those? So that is what the Vedic literature is prescribing. Nothing irrational, nothing unnatural, something very pleasing for the individual. So why not accept it? And why not achieve that goal? So, in other words, something which is, they're advising something which is very attractive to you. So why not follow it and attain it? Yeah? And have an easy method of attaining it. Well, why not? It's reasonable. So that's why we accept the authority, because it's setting us a very reasonable, attractive goal, which is adaptable to all situations and applicable to all people of the world. And it's easy. So why not accept it? Therefore, we should try for that, accept the scriptures and act according to that. Therefore, this is exactly what this king is doing. King Parishad is asking Sukadev as his authority, what should I do? What is the goal in life? Why we have this mind with all the contamination in it? How do we get out of this position? How do we concentrate the mind? So he's asking all these important questions. What is the goal, and how do we attain that goal? And the Bhagavatam, the whole scripture here, will answer that question in an elaborate way and also in simple form. And also in, let's say, step-by-step form also, as we see here, with some preliminary methods of practice, etc. So, in other words, this scripture does not force anybody to accept one principle over the other. You're allowed to practice at various levels, one level or the other, depending on your particular qualification and liking, whatever. At the same time, it very nicely explains that it's not all one, and all isn't the same. One is superior, one is inferior, etc. So eventually you have to go from one stage to a higher stage, to a higher stage, to a higher stage, to the ultimate stage. So not everything is equal. But according to your qualification, you have to start at some sort of level. You may not start at the highest level, you can start at some other level. So there's a little flexibility there also. It's not just do this or nothing. There's some flexibility in the whole process. Of course, it is important to first set the goal for the human being. So I said, all human beings have a little question in their mind somehow or other. But unfortunately, we got a lot of other questions in our mind also, so that gets covered up an awful lot. So as Prabhupada said, the animals are asking questions also. Where's my food? Where's my food? Where's my house? Where's my mate? Where's my babies? These are the questions that the animals ask, which is basically eating, sleeping, mating, defending, how to survive. So the questions are there. And human beings will ask the same questions to some degree. So nothing unusual in that sense. Okay, human being's an animal, so let him do animal activities. But as I said, the human being has a little bit of a higher intelligence, so he can ask another question, not just in terms of me and my body. The human being has self-awareness. That means he can think, oh, I exist. The animals don't think like that. I exist. Now, what is my purpose in life? The animal doesn't think like that. But the human being says, look, I'm existing here in the world. I got this body, and there's a world here. What is this to do? So this is what a human being can ask. So who am I actually? What am I doing here in this world? Why am I doing this? So this is what the human being can ask. He can ask this type of question. Ultimately, he says, what is the real purpose of my life? That's the ultimate question of the human being. What should I do in this life? And this is exactly what Parikshit here is asking to the Sukadeva Goswami. I'm going to die. What should I do? I got a few 7 days left. What am I supposed to do? What's to achieve a goal? What is the goal, and how am I going to achieve it in 7 days? So very important that we answer this question. What am I supposed to do here? Which means ultimately, what is my final goal? That is the human being's ultimate question that he has to answer. You ask the question and get the answer. So we see that even, as I said, human beings, no matter what level they're at and how much they're struggling in this world, to some degree they do ask this question somehow or other, and particularly when kids are growing up and they start asking this question of, what am I doing here anyway, you know? And then they look at their parents, and their parents can't answer the question, and then they run off away from home or whatever to try to find an answer, but then they forget about that and they do other things. So it's a question that we do ask, but then we forget about it later on. It's remarkable, like we see in the 1960s, all the kids are revolting, and we got something else is there. Like that. But then you look at them 30 years later, a lot of them just went back to the regular life, and they started working and going back to normal things of eating, sleeping, mating, defending, like everybody else again, and they forgot. Everyone forgot. Very few are asking that question later on. So somehow or other we get distracted. And then we forget that question, and the ultimate question, what's the very purpose of life? But it's actually a sign that the human being is special. He's different from the other animals. We can ask the question, but also special because we can also get the answer. And then we can achieve that goal also. So that's the special opportunity of getting a human body. And that is why the Vedic literature always says, if you get a human form, that is a very rare gift. And you should use it properly. Don't just waste your life like an animal and eating and sleeping, etc. But rather you use it to ask the question and get the answer and achieve the ultimate goal. Okay, so human being has this propensity to ask that question, and at least, even if they forget it later on, they do ask it at some stage. But we should actually, as human beings, at least try to get the answer. What is the goal? Understand what the goal is. And I said, if we go to the scripture, then we get a good answer. We don't have to speculate and waste half of our life on going in the wrong direction. Just go in one direction. So, what is that goal? The Vedic scriptures answer it very nicely in a way that was everyone can accept. And what is the ultimate goal? To be happy. That's all the goal. The goal is happiness, bliss. Somehow we should get happiness, but then the whole trick is, what is that happiness? That's what we have to define. Yes, we want to be happy, and the body itself is not going to give that happiness because it's gone after 70, 80 years, 90 years, can't finish. So where's your happiness? So then the happiness is not with the body, the happiness is with something else, which we call the Atma, or the soul, or the Jiva, which is not the body. So it's that consciousness within the body, that's where the happiness should lie, not with the adjustments of the material body and the senses, or even with the mind, because the mind is also part of your body. So in other words, the goal is the happiness of the spiritual particle, the soul. That is the goal of each person, to get that happiness. So it's, in other words, it's eternal happiness. It's not happiness attached to a material body, which is temporary. So because it's eternal happiness, it will be satisfying. If it's temporary happiness, it's not going to be satisfying because they're worried it's going to end in the next moment. So then we get suffering again. So that happiness should be eternal. So if it's connected with the Atma, or the soul, fine. It's beyond the body. The body dies, but the soul doesn't die. So we get our eternal happiness that way, from the soul, not from the body. So this is what we call spiritual happiness. But then, what is the happiness? in the material world, what is our happiness? So on the gross level, it's happiness from material objects. I possess things. Got a body, etc. I get some enjoyment with my senses. I use my senses and I get some sort of happiness that way. And so physical and sensual happiness, we can say, is one level of happiness. And then above that, we got the internal sense, the mind. So we got to have peace of mind, some satisfaction in the mind. So these are all the types of happiness we conceive of in the material world. But it's not very good because it keeps changing all the time. And the happiness turns into lamentation. Objects disappear. People disappear. Everything, changes all the time. So it's very temporary, whatever happiness we get. Secondly, we all understand that it's not real happiness. It's some very temporary, artificial thing. And the reason that we feel like that is because it's nothing to do with the soul. It's only the senses interacting with the brain and the nerves and all this, and we get something called pleasure symptoms in our brain. Pleasure center gets activated, and we say, that's happiness, but it's a physical interaction of chemicals and nerves, etc. It's got nothing to do with the Atma at all. That type of happiness. So that's there in the material world, but can't really think of that. So anyway, we have all these types of happiness, and we try to experience happiness with our senses and all that, and we get frustrated. Ultimately, we try, we won't go for these material things. We'll try to establish nice relationships with people, and this is where we get love. And so we think ultimately the goal in life is to have a nice loving relationship, and with that I'll get happy. So that becomes the goal of people ultimately. So we see that in ancient societies. They actually encourage that. Everybody get married, everybody have children. So in this way you can get your little bit of happiness in the material world. In modern society they kind of changed that a little bit. So we can have happiness, but we don't want the family unit at all. So we try to get part of the happiness, but we don't want the family part of it. So it becomes very problematic and more distressing. So even the relationship idea of getting happiness through relationships gets more frustrating in the modern world. It's more fragile than ever before. So previously, most people, they got married and they lived together for 60 years or whatever. Now it's very lucky if they live together for 10 years or 15 years and then they disappear and go somewhere else. So the idea of getting happiness from human relations is becoming more and more bleak as we go on. It's more and more frustrating. Yet, people are still striving for that, somehow or other. Still striving for that, even though it looks more and more impossible as we go on. Nevertheless, they try to get happiness from that. This, again, is part of mental type of happiness. Okay? So that's where the happiness lies as far as the material world is concerned. And as I said, it's all frustrating. It doesn't end in any good result ultimately, because we got to leave our body and then all the relationships are gone. So, how does the scripture define that happiness which is eternal? It's the happiness of the soul. It has to be eternal. And it's also based on relationship. Again. So, of course, we can go to one stage where it's no relationship. It's just get rid of the material body. End the process of birth and death. This is what we call nirvana, or liberation. And you can get to that state through jnana and yoga. So that's one thing. I could get rid of the material body. It's my peace, and that's my happiness. The soul is free from all of this. But as I said, the idea of the soul is happiness. So that's not actually happiness. That's the absence of suffering. To get rid of our body and enter into that nirvana state. So what would the happiness of the soul be? So very nicely, we could say, in correspondence to our material world, the happiness of the soul is the happiness of a relationship with another soul. A loving relationship. But this is soul to soul, not body to body. So therefore, it's a spiritual relationship. And it's a relationship of love, with no tinge of ignorance, with no tinge of selfishness. So we call this unconditional love. Unmotivated. love. Or we call this bhakti or prema. So that's the natural goal of the soul, to develop that love, natural love, we call bhakti or prema. And through that we get our happiness. Simple. So, to do that, then we have to go further and say, well, what's that relationship, loving relationship? What does it mean? So obviously the relationship between two, not one person. You can't have a relationship with yourself, a relationship with another person. And it can't be material with bodies. It has to be with the soul. And it has to be a soul with another type of soul like that. So that who's that other person we have the relationship with? So this is where in this whole purport, and Prabhupada is explaining it to some degree, is that we have a relationship with another person who has another form, like we have a form, personal form, and that's the Supreme Lord. And we have a relationship with him in love, that's all. It says you have a relationship in this material world with another person, have a little loving relationship. So you have the Atma or the Jiva, the soul has a relationship with the Supreme Lord in a loving relationship. And it can be very similar. We have friendship relationships, we have servant-master relationships, we have parental relationships, and we have conjugal relationships, as in the material world. So we have in the spiritual world also. And through that we get our bliss. What's the difference? This relationship in the spiritual realm is eternal. It is perfect, because the Supreme Lord is perfect, and the Jiva has no more material contamination of all the things in the material world anymore. So we have a perfect eternal relationship of love with no selfish intentions. And that gives rise to bliss. So in this way, we become happy. So that's the ultimate goal of everyone, ultimately. The whole goal of Scripture is to make everybody happy eternally. The only thing is, to do that, we have to give up everything in the material world, which is considered to be this manomalam, the contamination of the mind. As Prabhupada mentions here, all of the ignorance and all of the desires and all the contamination that we gather birth after birth that gets stuck in our mind, we have to get rid of all of that. And if we're attached to it, we can't get out. So we have to make an attempt to get rid of it. But it's very difficult. So to make it easier then to get rid of all of this contamination, if we aspire through this process of bhakti, this practice of devotion to the Lord, then very easily all this gets destroyed. So that's the basic process we follow. So there are various stages here, and as Prabhupada mentions in the purport, one stage is, well, okay, some people have difficulty understanding how God can have a form and how he can be personal, because then we'll think of a person in this world, and then it becomes material. So therefore we'll think God is something impersonal. So then one step forward is, okay, don't think of it as completely impersonal. God is, he's got his form, but you can think of everything in this world as a representation of God somehow or other, and appreciate through the material world the power of God and the qualities of God, even though it's on a higher level. So that's what we call this universal form or pantheism or whatever. And then from then you can get to a more personal form. Once you think God has qualities which are spiritual, then we can concentrate later on a personal form of the Lord. So this is one step that is indicated here in the next verses, the gradual approach through appreciating the Lord in the Virat Rupa, or the universal form, the Lord as the material world, so to speak. So one object of meditation, and then from that we progress upwards, and in doing so we gradually get control of the mind, and we begin to reject all of the contamination, and we get more and more attracted to the spiritual form of the Lord. Okay, Hare Krishna. Keeps going. Anyway, just speak loudly.
So in the Bhagavad Gita we have the analogy of the five forces, the senses, drawing, and the chariot of the body.
Yeah.
So the reins are the mind and the driver is the intelligence. So obviously the intelligence has to be strong to control the mind. So the question would be how to make that intelligence strong.
Oh, well, if the intelligence follows the scripture, then at least we got a good support there. And if the intelligence is connected somehow with the soul, the Atma, then we also got a good thing there. So in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says if you have a higher taste, you give up the lower taste. So if we get some connection and some appreciation of the Atma within us, the spiritual aspect, that spiritual taste can influence the intelligence to control the mind, to control the senses. If it's not there, then of course the senses go wild and the mind just follows them, and the intelligence, they follow the senses actually and encourage the senses to do whatever they want.
One could say that the devotee, the most advanced devotees, Prabhupada also explains, he sees the tree, remembers Krishna and feels separation from Krishna. So the Virat Rupa is
it's a little less than that. We have the highest in prema, the highest stage, the Uttamadhikari. He sees everything in this world is related to the Lord in prema. So the trees are related, they're bowing down to Krishna and offering their fruits, and the clouds are colored darkish like Krishna's complexion, and the dunes are Govardhan Hill, etc. So he sees everything, the whole world in terms of spiritual world or whatever like that. So that's quite a different conception. Then we have the lower conception where we can just think of, as in Bhagavad Gita, as the aswata tree representing the Lord, or the makara, the fish is representing the Lord, or the lion is representing the Lord because they have certain outstanding qualities. So this is called Vibhuti Yoga. Certain things in material nature have an outstanding, excellent material quality, which is a reflection of a spiritual quality in Krishna. So that's another way we can meditate. So that's more on the material level, that we see things in the material world, then we have we're reminded of Krishna. And if we get to a more general level, then we appreciate the material world as this is a reflection somehow of God's mercy or something like that. In a very general way, we can think of the world as appreciate the finer aspects of the world and think of it as a reflection of God's glory or something like that. And then, of course, there's the other gross form where we have an actual body with a head and arms and legs, and then we stick all the material elements and all the rivers and trees and everything upon that body as if it's a form. So we make the whole universe into a form, and then we respect that form or admire that form.
You mentioned the scriptures give us guidelines of how we can either elevate ourselves or degrade ourselves. And we also hear in scriptures that there's niyamagraha and niyamagraha. We follow the rules and regulations for the sake of following them. So sometimes we see some devotees want to micromanage new people when they come, or they give them the guilt trip that you have to do a certain way, fit into a box. Whereas we have a nature of, we want our autonomy as well, but we also want to follow the instructions of the scriptures so we can make progress and elevate our consciousness. So how to balance that, following the rules and regulations properly and not just for the sake of following them, or not being too loose.
Well, one, of course, the rule, how to follow and not follow too heavily or whatever like that. Too much niyamagraha, too much following the rules, and that's one thing. And not following the rules is another problem. So we have to strike a balance between following rules and not following rules. So the basic principle is we should understand the goal of the rules first before we institute our rules. And as is said in Nectar Devotion, the goal of all the rules is only two principles. I always think of the Lord and never forget him. So the purpose should support, the rules should support that. And if they don't, then they become non-functional. So therefore, when we set up our rules, it's actually to help us remember the Lord at all times. If the rules don't do that, then of course they're not functioning properly. So that's the basic principle we have to follow. Now, we have general rules that everybody should follow. They're all good, all favorable for people at a certain level. Other people may not be qualified at that level, so they cannot follow those rules. So they're given a different set of rules to follow. So some people follow this level of rules, some people follow another set of rules, some people follow another set of rules according to their qualification. So we have to see where people fit also, and then we put them in the proper set of rules to follow, like that. Which is maybe say where they can be comfortably advance. Those rules they can follow so they can comfortably advance and come to a higher stage where they can follow more rules. So we need to situate people in the proper place with the rules. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much, Maharaj, for speaking to us.
Hare Krishna. Maharaj, you nicely explained that the true happiness can come when we relate to another person as a soul.
Yes.
So my question is whether that, and of course the reference there is relating to Krishna,
Yeah.
Supreme Soul. But is it possible to have that same loving relationship and derive true happiness
To other souls.
to other souls? And if it is,
Yeah.
how?
Yeah. So the question is, what about other souls? Can we have relationships with other souls which are equal? You're saying? Well, we have automatically we have relationships with other souls in the spiritual realm, and therefore we see it's not just one person there with Krishna. We have billions of people there with Krishna, and they all have a relationship with Krishna or other forms of the Lord. And they also have a relationship with each other. It's not they ignore each other. So they all have relationships with each other. And they may have obviously have loving relationships. So the friends of Krishna also are friends with each of the other friends. So Sri Dhamma and Subal, they're friends with each other also. So they have relationships as Jiva with Jiva. But their main relationship for each individual is their relationship with Krishna. So we can say why that has to be, why Krishna has to dominate everything like this. The answer is it's the nature of Supreme Lord that he is the all-attractive, and that even if everything that each jiva has obviously attractive qualities and activities, etc., the Supreme Lord is the most attractive of all. So naturally everybody gravitates towards him. So he's got all the qualities in full, and each jiva or atma there in the spiritual world has wonderful qualities because of his relationship with Krishna. So everything depends ultimately on that Supreme Lord. So that's why we're called Nitya Krishna Das. We're all eternally the servants of Krishna. So therefore our first relationship is with Supreme Lord, and then secondarily with all the other jivas there, who are also, we can say, representatives of the Lord, being his particles or whatever like that, his offshoots. And so therefore we relate with everybody, but primarily we have our relationship with the Lord. So we do have relationships with all other jivas there, but our life-sustaining relationship is with Supreme Lord.
In any situation, there seems to be a dialogue going on, I guess, between the mind and intelligence. And ideally, the intelligence is predominating over the mind, using proper discrimination, etc. Yeah. But obviously, the mind has a part to play. So what's the ideal situation, like scenario that the mind is operating?
What's the
ideal situation, like the mind properly functioning?
Okay. Yeah. So the ideal situation of the mind, intelligence, etc., is top down. Atma at the top, and then the intelligence, which is discriminating ability, following scripture, giving directions to the mind, okay, do it this way, and then the mind is saying, well, I like it, don't like whatever, but I'll follow the intelligence, because I'm under the intelligence, and then it goes to the senses, etc., and then we do our actions. But there has to be that connection with the soul. If the connection is lost, then basically they operate independently, and it's just the mind and the senses operating and using the intelligence to fulfill their purposes of the mind. If we interrupt that relationship with the soul, if there's a connection with the soul, then we can get the proper hierarchy of control there going. That's why we say higher taste. So higher taste, spiritual taste, then we can begin to control the intelligence and the sense mind and the senses.
So the mind operating, like accepting and rejecting, it has to be on the basis of intelligence.
Yeah. Otherwise, if it's not, I like this, finish. I'll do this because I like it. I don't like this, I won't do it. That's all. It's basically, I like and don't like. Basically, that's what the mind does. But then we have to have a rational behind that, and then we base that on scripture or whatever, and higher principles. Okay.
Maharaj, is pure bhakti a synonym for prema?
What's that?
Is pure bhakti a synonym for prema?
Well, often we do that, but of course, usually in our conversations, we talk about bhakti as a sadhana, and then prema as the goal. In other words, but it's the same thing actually, but in this perfect state. So we call bhakti as the practice, and then pure bhakti in its practice, and then when we go through the stage of bhava, and then we go to prema. Prema means that bhakti has matured into the final form, the fruit, so to speak, from the little plant. It grows up and gets flowers, and then it gets the fruit. The fruit is prema. So that's the final result. But it's actually bhakti in its purest form with no contaminations at all. Well, it's actually the same. It's just one thing. Bhakti and prema are the same actually, but in the beginning we call it sadhana, and then later on we call it prema.
One more question, if you don't mind. So you mentioned that human beings, they have self-awareness.
Yeah.
They have propensity to pursue God.
Yeah.
What about living beings on the subterranean plane?
Well, they're jivas. If they're the human-like, they have some awareness like that. Of course, not everybody's a demon down in the lower planetary systems, because we have Prahlad down there, and Vamana Dev's down there, and Bhanu Maharaj is also down there. So devotees are also there. Shiva's also down there, apparently. So it's not everybody's a demon. Yamaraj is down there. He's a devotee also. So we do have devotees down there also.
I primarily mean those
the demonic
planets where it's very much developed.
Yeah. So that
they're technically very much developed, but
so they're influenced by tamagun, or mode of ignorance, an awful lot more than anything else down there. But because they do have let's say a higher body in one sense, a human-like body, they do have possibility of getting a little bit of awareness. So there's possibility they can get liberated from that state by their activities if they perform bhakti. So they're not, condemned forever to be in a hellish existence. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Hare Krishna.
Hold on to your seats, KE. The delicious new one.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna,
I think
Prabhuji. Thank you very much. Prabhuji, what is the name of
Bhanu Maharaj? Bhanu Maharaj.
Bhanu Maharaj. Where is he from?
He's from Japan, but he's based in Chennai, South India, and then he has. Yes, Mataji.
I think he's very good.
Yes. It's very good. Yeah, yes. There's a very good temple in Chennai who has, I mean, he has inspired to build, and then